Have you ever wanted to see a PG-13 vampire horror movie with no blood? Have you wanted to see Jared Leto in another superhero property? Then Morbius is for you.
Morbius sucks!
Oh, I got that out of my system. I knew it was going to be bad going in. Many of you know it's bad already. Everyone who saw it basically knew it was going to be bad, or they were tricked into seeing it because they thought it was part of the MCU. No, it's not a Marvel Studios made film. I only saw it out of obligation to make this review, I guess. I didn't want to see it and give them money, but my justification was I get to tell you here not to see it. Don't let it be in vain. Please, don't go see this movie. There's absolutely no reason to see this movie. It is terrible and awful. I only really liked some of the trailers before the movie started. That was the only enjoyment I got from the entire experience. Usually, the trailers are bad. In front of Morbius, I got the trailers for Spider-Verse, Doctor Strange, movies that I'm actually looking forward to and have good trailers. I enjoyed the trailers more than the movie itself. You know, there's a lot of loose connections to the MCU and Spider-Man, which feel really shoved in. Especially in that first trailer, they were really cramming in all those references just for marketing. That is the only reason you would see Morbius, is because it's connected to Spider-Man, not because it's a good movie on its own. Any connections to the MCU or Spider-Man, the stuff with Michael Keaton, all of that is relegated to 2 mid-credit scenes. If you were looking forward to that Michael Keaton scene, you're going to have to wait an hour and a half to see it, and it's very quick. About 1 hour into the movie, you see a Daily Bugle newspaper, and then there's another one a little bit later. That's it. That's the only connection you get in the movie, aside from Michael Keaton in the end credits. Which is sad. I really like Michael Keaton, but this was obviously a paycheck for him. He did not give a shit. He's maybe in this movie for a minute or two. One of the mid-credit scenes, they just cut to the big rift in the sky that was in the new Spider-Man No Way Home movie. And then Michael Keaton teleports into an empty cell. It's just an excuse to tie it into the MCU so people are genuinely confused as to where this movie lies.
What's up, Doc?
I think it's really messed up to be tricking people like that. The audience for this kind of thing are probably expecting something a little more fun, and this movie attempts to be scary. Sony insists that this Morbius character is the next big thing in superhero pop culture, and you're gonna be absolutely stunned by this obscure comic character. Out of all characters, why Morbius? Why is this like the really interesting one? Especially if you're going to make it a vampire movie that's PG-13. Before the movie came out, the cast and crew were just spoiling the movie in interviews. No one cared. No one believed in Morbius. The superhero movie genre gets a lot of flack, and I would consider it a genre at this point. There's so many movies that I would consider in that genre. On Letterboxd, I don't think there's a superhero genre, but it does fall into other genres, of course, such as science fiction, fantasy. A lot of these movies can feel like the same kind of shit. They can feel very cliched, but I think that's a criticism I could throw to a lot of horror movies. I don't think you can say that every superhero film is the same shit when you see movies like The Dark Knight, or some of the best movies in that genre. That being said, Morbius isn't one of these. It's one of the really shitty ones, and it has all of those cliches you'd expect in that kind of movie. It feels so fucking dated. We have seen so many other great superhero movies at this point. I think Suicide Squad is a worse movie, but I think Morbius is more boring. I was in physical pain watching this movie. It was so boring. I wanted to fucking leave so bad. The pacing of this film was terrible. The movie felt like it went on forever. I felt like I was there for 3 hours. It's very difficult to pick out stuff I liked about this movie. Some of the graphic design with the credits was kind of cool. That's at the very beginning. I hated the opening scene. That was an incredibly boring way to start the film. So the story itself is something like this guy, Michael Morbius, is trying to cure himself using bats and accidentally makes himself a vampire. He also has a childhood friend who's also sick, so he uses his serum to make himself a bad guy. The villain sucked. He's just the old friend who becomes a bad guy, the same cliche you've seen a million times in these kinds of movies, Spider-Man movies especially, with the character of Harry Osborn. The villain has this dance clothing montage for some reason. This scene was completely pointless. This movie tries to be scary and it completely fails. There's this one scene with this hallway and it's the scariest lighting ever. This nurse is walking down the hallway as the motion sensor lights turn on. During action scenes, they would go into slow motion for a brief second or two, like a Zack Snyder movie, with the speed up slow motion. And there would be a loud bass sound like blah. The police are also chasing after Morbius in the film. One of the cops is played by Tyrese. All of those scenes felt incredibly cliched. They chase after him and put Morbius in prison, where he's visited by his friend, who also leaves his cane there, which is the reveal that his friend is the bad guy. Whoa. So now I'm gonna get into the ending, basically the third act. So Crown kills Morbius's girlfriend, he kills Jared Harris, and then they have a huge fight, and it's uninteresting, this fight. The action was really bad, I found, in this part. It was just over way too quick. It's like a 2-minute fight, and then Jared Leto shoves the cure into him. What was even the point of this story? Everyone he loves by the end of it dies. Actually, the girl isn't dead. She becomes a vampire, and that's a setup for a sequel. There are two mid-credit scenes for some reason. The first one has Michael Keaton in a prison, and it has nothing to do with the plot, they just shoved that in. The next post-credit scene is Jared Leto driving, and he meets Michael Keaton in the middle of the desert, like it's Breaking Bad. It didn't even feel like a superhero movie from the early 2000s. It felt like I was watching The Covenant, directed by Rennie Harlin. I want to give it props for some of the moments that are not absolutely terrible. It feels very hollow to me because it isn't really in service of a story that I thought was captivating at all. The Morbius character wasn't interesting in this movie. The color palette of the entire film is dark blue. Everything looks flat. There are points where the lighting is so bad that you can't even make out skin tones on the actors. It just looks like their skin is blue. It has some of the worst editing I think I've ever seen in a film, at least recently. The movie starts with a flash forward, and then it flashes back 25 years. There are these kids in a hospital in this one part, and it cuts to them hanging out, like later on, in just the middle of the scene. It just cuts to the next scene. The kid getting beat up by the bullies in that one scene, that was hilarious. That was so poorly done. One of the most rushed plot points in the entire film is this new makeshift lab Morbius has to steal from this group of criminals who are also printing counterfeit money, and he just so happens to hear it with his vampire hearing. So Michael Morbius is a doctor who invented artificial blood in this movie's universe, and artificial blood is a big part of the film. It's what he uses to stay alive. He drinks the artificial blood. He squishes it out of a bag into his mouth. Every scene of him devouring the artificial blood was really corny, and I was laughing in the theater, even though it was clearly supposed to be intense. Jared Leto was horrendous. I cannot stress that enough. I don't know what I was supposed to get out of Michael Morbius. The only moment of levity that people laughed at, like in that trailer, was when he says, "I am Venom," and then he goes, "No, I'm just Michael Morbius," or whatever. Like, that was the only part. A couple people laughed in the theater when I saw the trailer.
I am Venom. I'm just kidding. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
And that part isn't even in the movie. He says the Venom part, but he doesn't say the line after it. He doesn't say the rest of it. So yeah, Tyrese is in the movie. He is really bad in this movie. There are some actors in this movie that I do like. I really like Jared Harris as an actor. I think he's really good in the show Chernobyl. His character's supposed to be a crucial emotional part of the story. I more have a connection with that actor because I think he's a good actor. I don't want him to not get parts after this movie, and they don't utilize anyone's acting potential in this movie. The dialogue is fucking terrible. It's boring exposition. Tomorrow I will be forced to consume human blood and I will not do that. That is literally a fucking line in the movie. In an interrogation scene between Jared Leto and Tyrese, Jared Leto has the line, and I'm gonna try to say it like how he does. "I'm getting hungry. You won't like me when I'm hungry. Did I buy a ticket for the Hulk? I thought I bought a ticket for the film Morbius. Sony, for the most part, makes really bad movies, and this is one of them. This is a very bad film. I really enjoyed Spider-Man No Way Home, but I had recently seen that Uncharted movie, which is based on a video game series I actually like. Yeah, I do play video games sometimes. The games are really exciting and fun, and the movie isn't. Tom Holland was completely miscast in that film. Mark Wahlberg was also a complete miscast.
What?
A lot of those criticisms I have with Uncharted, while I have the same criticisms with Morbius. They're both very inconsistent. That movie didn't really capture the heart of those games at all, and Morbius doesn't succeed in anything it's trying to do. If they can't even handle Uncharted correctly, which is a property they created, then the task of making a Morbius movie is impossible for them. They wanted to make some villain movie that would set up a grander universe with Spider-Man, but it doesn't work. The movie could have been more interesting if there was a hero to fight Morbius. There's other characters, such as Miles Morales. They could have done something interesting there, but they didn't. They just made the same crap as Venom, because they just want to make a bunch of villain movies so they can make a Sinister Six movie at some point. Vulture, Morbius, and Venom? Who are they going to introduce next into the Sinister Six and make a whole film about them? I can see how, if you like the character of Morbius, you think this idea has potential, but the movie doesn't live up to that potential. It is the same crap as Venom. Morbius kills people, but you don't see it. There's a little bit of blood at times, but it's such a small part of the movie because it's a PG-13. Now we can discuss the box office. Morbius is supposed to be a big superhero blockbuster. It has a reported production budget of about $75 million, which is pretty humble for a superhero movie. It'll probably make an estimated $38 million to $40 million this weekend. I'd say if it makes somewhere in the ballpark of like 200 to 300 million, it would like actually be considered profitable. People know it's terrible. That kind of makes me feel relieved. But really, aside from a couple parts being made fun of, the movie is mostly really boring. If you got a kick out of that subway fight scene that felt like it was out of an anime or something, then I'm really happy for you. The theater was pretty empty considering it was the Friday it came out. The audience was quiet. They didn't really have any kind of reaction to it. Again, that doesn't mean they thought the movie was bad. I got the impression that people were bored, but that could just be me because I was bored out of my mind. The joke is, Morbius is getting bad reviews because the critics are paid off by Disney, which is funny because they're just used to watching the same Disney crap. You might have a point. This movie is still bad though. It doesn't matter if you compare it to Marvel Studios or not. It's a bad movie on its own. I'm going to read some of the top-rated user reviews for the film Morbius, because I just kind of want to prove my point that a lot of these user reviews are kind of dumb. What Sony have done with the character is nothing short of brilliant. From the particle movements that drag behind as he zips back and forth across the screen, to the way he feels and sees the air currents that bore him aloft. The facial effects, while a little cheesy, are still many times better than a lot of horror makeup effects done today. Has this person seen Malignant? And are masterfully worked into the scenes. The best moments have to be with Matt Smith and Jared Leto both on screen. Matt Smith, this movie was really good, so don't listen to the critics because they are all wrong. This movie has lots of action and suspense and thrills, so I mean, come on, what's not to like? Hey, this guy's got a point. Don't see this movie. It is a terrible fucking waste of time. It is so boring, and I'm not even opposed to this kind of film, or a dark film, or a film with violence, or a film about vampires, or a film that has a loose connection to Spider-Man, or any of these kinds of ideas. I just thought the film was completely uninteresting. I hate this movie. I give Morbius a 2 out of 10. This movie is a fucking piece of shit. And as soon as that second mid-credit scene was over, I fucking got up and ran out of there, and I never looked back. I hope I'm not exaggerating and just like going along with the crowd of people who just hate this movie and want to hate it. I don't think there's this amazing film buried in Morbius somewhere that I'm just not seeing. We'll just have to wait and see the kind of response this movie has. It doesn't have many ratings, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens with Morbius after its release. I'm very curious what the total gross of the film is. Do not see it. If you do, maybe don't see it in the theater, then you'll give them money and they'll make more. But I saw it just to tell you, don't see it. I guess the hook, or what makes the story kind of unique, is that it's a synthetic or artificially created vampire made in a lab. He is a living vampire. The look of Morbius himself is just awful, and the same with the villain. They both just looked laughably terrible. Some of the stuff that could be interesting is him actually becoming a vampire and, you know, learning his powers and whatever, but they try to integrate those things into the story, and I guess those moments aren't completely horrible, but they've been done before, and there's nothing in this movie that really subverts it. It's just the same kind of cliche crap again. And I can't get over the fact that they're just tricking people into seeing this movie because they think it's a Marvel Studios movie, which it isn't. The Marvel Studios brand is strong for the most part. They still have some bad movies, don't get me wrong, but Marvel Studios has never made anything as bad as Morbius.